The morning light filtered through the large windows of bloom and stems, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Lena Kowalska stood behind the wooden counter, her slender fingers working methodically as she trimmed the stems of white roses, each cut precise and careful. The water in the crystal vase rippled gently as she arranged each flower, turning the bouquet slowly, studying it from every angle, with the focused attention of an artist perfecting her canvas. Outside, Brooklyn was waking up. The sounds of the neighborhood drifted through the slightly open door, the rumble of delivery trucks, the chatter of early morning joggers, the distant bark of Mrs. Chen's terrier from the apartment above the bakery next door. It was a symphony Lena had grown to love over the past 3 years since she'd opened her shop on this quiet corner of Carroll Gardens. At 25, Lena had built exactly the life she'd always dreamed of. Simple, peaceful, beautiful. Her small flower shop was her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself in the delicate architecture of petals and leaves, where every day brought the sweet perfume of fresh blooms and the satisfaction of creating something lovely for others. The shop wasn't large, just enough space for her work table, displays along the walls, and a small greenhouse attachment in the back, but it was hers, and that meant everything. She glanced at the clock. 6:15 in the morning. Most shops on the block wouldn't open for hours, but Lena preferred these quiet early moments. This was when she did her best work, when the world was still soft and unhurried, when she could arrange bouquets for the day's orders without interruption. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her best friend Sophia. "Coffee later? I need to tell you about the disaster date last night." Lena smiled, typing back quickly. "Noon? I'll bring pastries from Angelo's. Can't wait to hear this one." Sophia's dating adventures were legendary, and legendarily catastrophic. Last month it had been the guy who brought his mother to dinner. The month before, someone who spent 2 hours explaining cryptocurrency. Lena loved hearing these stories, grateful for her simple, drama-free existence. Romance had never been a priority for her. She had her flowers, her little apartment 3 blocks away, her Sunday dinners with the elderly Polish couple who lived downstairs and reminded her of her late grandmother. It was enough, more than enough. She moved to the back greenhouse, where morning glories climbed up wooden trellises and orchids bloomed in careful rows. The humidity here was thick and warm, wrapping around her like a blanket. She checked the soil moisture, made notes in her weathered journal about which plants needed attention, adjusted the temperature controls. Everything had to be perfect. Her flowers depended on her consistency, her care, her unwavering attention to their needs. That's when she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the morning's gentle rhythm. The back door, the one that opened to the narrow alley behind the shops, rattled violently. Once, twice, then a heavy thud, as if something had fallen against it. Lena froze, her hand still hovering over the African violets. Her heart began to beat faster. The back door was always locked. She rarely used it except to put out recycling. The alley was empty most of the time, just brick walls and dumpsters and the occasional stray cat. Another thud, heavier this time, desperate. She should call someone. The police. Mr. Castellano from the deli who always looked out for her. Anyone. But her feet were already moving, carrying her toward the door almost against her will. Through the frosted glass panel, she could see a dark shape slumped against the frame. Her hand trembled as she reached for the deadbolt. "This is stupid, Lena," she whispered to herself. "This is how people get hurt in movies." But something in the way the shape moved, weakly, painfully, triggered every compassionate instinct she possessed. Someone needed help. That was all that mattered. She unlocked the door and pulled it open. A man nearly fell into her greenhouse, catching himself against the doorframe at the last second. He was tall, powerfully built, wearing an expensive black suit that was torn and stained with something dark across the left side. His dark hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead, and when he lifted his head to look at her, Lena felt her breath catch in her throat. His eyes were the darkest she'd ever seen, nearly black, set in a face that was striking despite, or perhaps because of, its hardness. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed together in a tight line of pain. He looked to be in his mid-30s, and everything about him radiated power and danger, from his broad shoulders to the way he held himself even while clearly injured. "Please," he said, his voice rough and low. "I need—" His knees buckled and Lena reacted instinctively, stepping forward to catch him. He was heavy, solid muscle and bone, and she struggled under his weight as she helped him stagger into the greenhouse. Her logical mind was screaming at her to run, to scream, to do anything except what she was doing, but her hands were already guiding him to the wooden bench near her potting table, easing him down with surprising gentleness. "You're hurt," she said, the words coming out steadier than she felt. "What happened? Should I call an ambulance?" "No." The word came out sharp, almost harsh. He grabbed her wrist, not hard, but firmly enough to stop her from reaching for her phone. His hand was warm, his grip desperate. "No hospitals, no police, please." Lena should have been terrified. Every rational part of her brain was telling her this was dangerous, that this man was clearly in some kind of serious trouble. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something beneath the hardness. Pain, yes, but also fear, and something else she couldn't quite name, a profound weariness that seemed to go deeper than any physical wound. "Let me see," she said quietly, gently pulling her wrist from his grip. He hesitated, then nodded slightly, leaning back against the greenhouse wall. Lena's hands shook as she carefully pulled aside his suit jacket. The white shirt beneath was soaked with blood on the left side, and when she lifted it, she saw a wound on his upper arm. Not deep, thank God, but bleeding steadily. It looked like something had grazed him, tearing through skin and muscle but missing anything vital. "I need to clean this," she said, her voice taking on the calm, focused tone she used when dealing with a crisis. Once, she'd helped her neighbor after a kitchen accident, applying pressure to a cut until the ambulance arrived. This wasn't so different, just a wound that needed cleaning. "I have a first aid kit, don't move." She grabbed the extensive medical supplies she kept for emergencies. Living alone, working with sharp tools, she'd learned to be prepared, and returned to find him watching her with those intense dark eyes. His gaze followed her every movement as she gathered clean towels, antiseptic, bandages. "This is going to hurt," she warned, soaking a cloth with antiseptic. "I've had worse." His voice was softer now, some of the edge gone. Lena carefully cleaned the wound, trying to ignore how intimate this felt. Her hands on his bare skin, his breath shallow and controlled as she worked. He barely flinched, which told her this wasn't his first time being injured. That thought should have frightened her more, but instead, she found herself curious. "What's your name?" she asked, focused on wrapping the bandage around his muscular arm. A pause. "Dante." "Dante," she repeated softly. "I'm Lena. I know." When she looked up in surprise, he added, "The sign out front. Lena's Bloom and Stems. You named it after yourself." "I did." She secured the bandage, her fingers gentle. "There. It's not professional medical care, but it should hold until you can get proper help." "Thank you." The words sounded rusty, as if he didn't say them often. They sat in silence for a moment, the early morning light growing stronger through the greenhouse glass, illuminating the rows of flowers around them. The contrast was surreal. This dangerous, wounded man sitting among her delicate orchids and roses, blood on his expensive suit, weariness etched into every line of his striking face. "You should go," Lena said finally, though part of her surprised herself by not wanting him to leave yet. "Whoever you're running from, they might come looking." Dante's jaw tightened. "They won't find me here, and I won't bring trouble to your door. I just needed—" He trailed off, looking around the greenhouse as if seeing it for the first time. "I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere safe." The word sounded foreign in his mouth, as if safety was a concept he barely remembered. Lena studied him, this stranger who had crashed into her carefully ordered world. She should be afraid. She should insist he leave immediately. But something in his exhausted eyes, in the way he looked at her flowers with something almost like longing, made her hesitate. "How did you get hurt?" she asked quietly. "Business disagreement." His mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'm cleaning your blood off my hands. I think I'm already involved enough to worry." He looked down at her hands, still stained red despite her efforts to wipe them clean, and something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or shame. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come here. I wasn't thinking clearly. I've walked past your shop before, seen you through the window working with your flowers. You always looked so peaceful, and when I needed somewhere to go, I thought—" He didn't finish, but Lena understood. In his world of violence and chaos, her little flower shop must have seemed like another universe entirely, a place where beauty still mattered, where things grew instead of being destroyed. "How long have you been watching my shop?" she asked, and she was surprised to find she wasn't frightened by the admission. "I'm not—" He stopped, ran a hand through his dark hair. "It's not like that. I own several buildings in Brooklyn, yours included. I do occasional walkthroughs of the neighborhoods. Your shop just stood out. You're my landlord? Lena couldn't help the surprise in her voice. Technically, yes. Through a property management company. I doubt you've ever seen my name on the paperwork. That explained the expensive suit, the air of authority even while wounded. This was a man used to power, to control. Whatever business he was in, it clearly involved significant money and equally significant danger. The sun had fully risen now, and Lena knew she should be opening her shop soon. Mrs. Patterson would be by at 7:30 to pick up the arrangement for her daughter's birthday. Mr. Rodriguez needed his weekly bouquet for his wife's grave. Life continued, routine and reliable, even with a wounded stranger sitting in her greenhouse. You need to rest, Lena said, making a decision that she knew might be foolish, but felt right anyway. There's a small storage room in the back of the shop. It has a cot I sometimes use when I work late. You can stay there until you're stronger, until it's safe for you to leave. Dante stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't know what I've done, what I'm involved in. No, Lena agreed, I don't. But I know you're hurt and you're scared, even if you won't admit it. And I know that everyone deserves basic human kindness, regardless of their past. You have no idea who I am, he said, and there was a warning in his voice now. What I'm capable of. Lena met his dark eyes steadily. You're right. I don't. But I know what I'm capable of. And that's choosing to help someone in need. What you do with that help is up to you. For a long moment they looked at each other, and Lena felt something shift in the air between them. A connection she couldn't explain, shouldn't want, but couldn't deny. This man was dangerous. His world was dangerous. But beneath all that hardness she sensed something else. Something broken and lost and desperately searching for a way back to something real. Just for a few hours, Dante said finally, his resistance crumbling under exhaustion and pain. Then I'll be gone. You'll never see me again. Lena nodded, knowing somehow that this was a lie, that this moment, this choice, had set something in motion that couldn't be undone. The storage room is through there, she said, pointing to a narrow door at the back of the greenhouse. I'll check on you in a couple of hours. Try to sleep. Dante stood slowly, steadying himself against the wall. As he moved past her, he paused, and for a moment Lena thought he might say something more. Instead, he just looked at her with those unfathomable dark eyes, and she felt herself shiver despite the greenhouse's warmth. Thank you, Lena, he said quietly. You shouldn't have helped me, but thank you. Then he disappeared through the door, leaving Lena alone among her flowers, her hands still stained with his blood, her heart beating faster than it had in years. She looked down at the crimson on her palms, then at the white roses on her work table, so pure and innocent and fragile. Two worlds had just collided in her greenhouse. The world of beauty and peace she'd so carefully cultivated, and a world of darkness and danger she'd never imagined entering. And somehow, impossibly, she had just chosen to let that darkness in. Outside, Brooklyn continued its morning routine. Cars honked. People laughed. The bakery's ovens filled the air with the scent of fresh bread. Everything was normal, ordinary, safe. But in Lena's greenhouse, surrounded by blooming flowers and the lingering scent of antiseptic, everything had changed. She could feel it in her bones, in her racing heart, in the way the morning light seemed different now, sharper somehow, more alive. She washed her hands 3 times before the water ran clear, then walked into her shop to prepare for the day. But her mind kept drifting back to the storage room, to the wounded stranger resting there, to the look in his eyes when he'd said her name, Dante. She didn't know his last name. Didn't know what he did or why he'd been hurt or who was after him. But she knew with absolute certainty that her quiet, peaceful life would never be quite the same again. And the strangest part? She wasn't sure she wanted it to be. When Lena checked the storage room 2 hours later, carrying a bottle of water and some pastries from Angelo's bakery, Dante was gone. The cot showed the impression of where he'd lain, and the small window she rarely opened was ajar, letting in the cool October air. He'd left as silently as he'd arrived, disappearing back into whatever dangerous world he came from. She told herself she was relieved, that this was exactly what she'd wanted, for him to recover enough to leave, to take his danger and darkness with him, to let her return to her simple, uncomplicated life. But as she stood there holding the water bottle, looking at the empty cot, she felt something she hadn't expected. Disappointment. You're being ridiculous, Lena, she muttered to herself, closing the window and locking it securely. He was a stranger. A dangerous stranger. This is a good thing. But the feeling lingered as she returned to her work, arranging Mrs. Patterson's birthday bouquet with yellow roses and white lilies. Her hands moved through the familiar motions, but her mind kept drifting back to those dark eyes, to the way Dante had looked at her flowers with such unexpected longing, to the rough sound of his voice when he'd said her name. The day passed in its usual rhythm. Customers came and went. Mrs. Patterson loved her arrangement and tipped generously. Mr. Rodriguez stood quietly for a moment with his weekly bouquet before thanking her softly and leaving. A young couple ordered flowers for their upcoming wedding, their excitement infectious as they debated between orchids and peonies. By the time Sophia arrived at noon, Lena had almost convinced herself that the morning had been some strange dream. "Okay, so picture this," Sophia said, bursting through the door with her characteristic energy, her curly dark hair bouncing as she moved. The guy shows up wearing a suit covered in cat hair. Not a little cat hair, Lena. Covered. Like he'd rolled around in a pet store. Lena couldn't help but laugh as she locked the door and flipped the "back in 30 minutes" sign. They sat at her work table, sharing pastries and coffee, while Sophia recounted her latest dating disaster with animated hand gestures and dramatic pauses. And then, he pulls out his phone and starts showing me pictures of his cats. For 45 minutes, Lena, I now know the names, personalities, and dietary restrictions of 7 cats I will never meet. Maybe he was nervous? Lena suggested, biting into a chocolate croissant. He named one Chairman Meow. Chairman Meow. Sophia groaned, dropping her head onto the table. Why are all the good ones taken or crazy? Or taken and crazy? You'll find someone, Lena said reassuringly, patting her friend's shoulder. Someone who appreciates your energy and only has a reasonable number of cats. What's a reasonable number? Wait, don't answer that. 0. The answer is 0. Sophia lifted her head, studying Lena with suddenly sharp eyes. You look different. Something happened. Lena felt her cheeks warm. Nothing happened. I'm just tired. Early morning. Lena Kowalska, I've known you since freshman year of college. You're a terrible liar. Your left eye does this twitchy thing. Sophia leaned forward conspiratorially. Spill. Did someone finally ask you out? Please tell me it's not Marcus from the hardware store. He's sweet, but he has the personality of unsalted butter. No one asked me out, Lena hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. Someone came by this morning, early. They were hurt and needed help. Sophia's eyes widened. Hurt how? Like accident hurt or I need to call the police hurt? Accident, Lena said quickly. Just a cut. I cleaned it, bandaged it, they left, that's all. They, he or she? He. And? Sophia practically bounced in her seat. What did he look like? Was he cute? Did you get his number? Sophia, he was injured and clearly in trouble. I wasn't thinking about whether he was attractive. That was a lie. She definitely noticed how attractive he was, in a dangerous, forbidden sort of way. But was he though? Sophia pressed, grinning now. Lena threw a piece of croissant at her. You're impossible. I'm invested in your love life since you refused to be. Come on, give me something. Tall? Short? Young? Old? Tall, Lena admitted. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair, dark eyes, and it doesn't matter because I'll never see him again. Something in her voice must have betrayed her feelings because Sophia's teasing smile softened into something more sympathetic. But you want to? Did she? Lena looked down at her hands, remembering how they'd shaken as she cleaned Dante's wound, how his skin had felt warm under her fingers, how his eyes had held hers with an intensity that had made her feel truly seen for the first time in years. I don't know what I want, she said honestly. It was just a strange morning. That's all. But it wasn't all. And as the days passed, Lena found herself thinking about Dante more than she should. She caught herself watching the back door, half expecting him to appear again. She wondered if his wound had healed properly, if he was safe, if he'd thought about her even once since he'd left. A week went by, then another. October deepened, bringing shorter days and cooler nights. Lena decorated her shop with small pumpkins and autumn flowers, bronze chrysanthemums, deep red dahlias, orange marigolds. She told herself she was being foolish, that she needed to forget about the dangerous stranger who'd stumbled into her life for a few brief hours. But forgetting proved impossible, especially when she started noticing things. Small things at first. A black luxury car parked across the street for hours, its windows too dark to see inside. The same man in a gray jacket walking past her shop multiple times a day, always glancing at her window. a sense of being watched that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She told herself she was being paranoid, that Dante's appearance had made her jumpy and suspicious, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger each day. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning 3 weeks after Dante had vanished from her storage room, he came back. Lena was creating a sympathy arrangement, white roses and lilies, simple and elegant, when the bell above her door chimed. She looked up, expecting Mrs. Chen coming for her weekly tulips, and instead found Dante standing in her doorway. He looked different than he remembered, still dangerous, still powerful, but more controlled now. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, his dark hair neatly styled, his posture confident and commanding. The wound on his arm was healed, hidden beneath expensive fabric. Only his eyes were the same, dark and intense, fixed on her with that unsettling focus. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lena's heart hammered in her chest, her hands frozen above the white roses. "Hello, Lena," he said finally, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. "You're better," she managed, setting down her scissors with trembling fingers. "Your arm, thanks to you." He stepped further into the shop, and Lena was acutely aware of how the space seemed to shrink around him, how his presence filled every corner. "I came to thank you properly. What you did that morning, helping me, risking your own safety. It wasn't something I deserved. Everyone deserves basic kindness," Lena said, repeating the words she'd told him that first day. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not everyone. Some of us have made choices that put us beyond kindness. I don't believe that." She met his eyes steadily, despite her racing pulse. "People can change. People can be redeemed. Can they?" The question sounded genuine, as if he truly didn't know the answer. He moved closer to her work table, studying the sympathy arrangement she'd been creating. "These are beautiful. Everything here is beautiful. It's like stepping into a different world." "That's what I wanted," Lena admitted. "A place where beauty still matters, where things grow instead of—" She stopped, suddenly aware of what she'd almost said. "Instead of being destroyed," Dante finished quietly. "You're not wrong. That's exactly what my world is. Destruction, power, control. No room for something as fragile as a flower." He reached out, almost touching a white rose, then pulled his hand back as if afraid he might damage it. "Or someone as good as you." "You don't know me," Lena said. "I'm not particularly good, I'm just, ordinary. You threw away your safety to help a stranger bleeding in your greenhouse. You gave me shelter when you should have called the police. That's not ordinary, Lena. That's extraordinary." His eyes held hers, and she felt that same electric connection from 3 weeks ago, that sense of two worlds colliding. But it was also dangerous. "And I need you to understand something." He moved around the work table, close enough now that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, sophisticated, with notes of cedar and spice. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "The people I deal with," he continued, his voice low and serious, "they don't follow the same rules as your world. They see kindness as weakness. They see connection as leverage. The fact that you helped me, that I came here, it puts you at risk. And I can't. I won't let that happen." "Is that why you stayed away for 3 weeks?" Lena asked, surprising herself with her boldness. "To protect me?" "Yes. And I should have stayed away permanently. But He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his hard features. "I couldn't stop thinking about this place. About you. About how you looked at me like I was still human, still worth saving." Lena's breath caught. "You are human, Dante. Whatever you've done, whatever your business involves, you're still human. You have no idea what I've done." His voice was rough now, almost harsh. "The decisions I've made, the things I've overseen. If you knew, you wouldn't look at me the way you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? Like you see something good, something worth redemption." He took a step back, as if physically distancing himself from the possibility. "But I didn't come here for absolution. I came to warn you. There are people who've noticed my unusual behavior. Coming here that morning was reckless. Returning now is even more reckless. You need to be careful. If anyone asks about me, anyone at all, you tell them nothing. You've never seen me. We've never spoken. Do you understand?" Fear crystallized in Lena's chest. "Are you saying I'm in danger?" "I'm saying that I've brought danger to your door, and I'm trying to minimize it." His jaw tightened. "I have people watching your shop. You won't see them, but they're there. If anything seems wrong, anyone threatening you, following you, anything at all, you call this number." He pulled a card from his pocket and placed it on her work table. Plain white, just a phone number, no name. Someone will answer immediately. Lena stared at the card, reality crashing down around her. This wasn't a romantic story. This was real danger, real consequences. She'd invited darkness into her sanctuary, and now she had to live with that choice. "I'm sorry," Dante said quietly, and the regret in his voice was palpable. "I'm sorry I came here that morning. I'm sorry I came back today. I'm sorry for dragging you into my world even at its edges. You deserve better than this." He turned to leave, and Lena's hand shot out instinctively, catching his arm. He froze at her touch, his muscles tensing beneath the expensive fabric. "Don't apologize for being human," she said firmly, "for needing help when you were hurt, for wanting to see something beautiful in a dark world. Those things don't make you weak, Dante. They make you alive." He looked down at her hand on his arm, then slowly, carefully covered it with his own. His hand was warm, strong, and surprisingly gentle. "You should be afraid of me. Maybe. But I'm not." And she realized it was true. Despite everything, the danger, the warnings, the obvious connection to violence, she wasn't afraid of him. Afraid for him, perhaps. Afraid of what his world might do to them both, but not of the man himself. "You should be," he repeated, but he didn't pull away from her touch. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by her small hand on his arm, his larger hand covering hers, the autumn light filtering through her shop windows and casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Around them, the flowers bloomed in silent witness, the roses and lilies, the chrysanthemums and dahlias, all the beauty Lena had worked so hard to cultivate. "I should go," Dante said finally, but he still didn't move. "Yes," Lena agreed, but she didn't release his arm. "Lena!" The bell above the door chimed loudly, shattering the moment. They sprang apart as Sophia burst into the shop, bags of takeout Thai food in her hands, already talking before she'd fully entered. "Okay, so I know it's not noon yet, but I had a cancellation and I'm starving and I got that pad thai you love." She stopped abruptly, seeing Dante, her eyes going comically wide. Oh, I'm interrupting. I'm totally interrupting. Hi, I'm Sophia, Lena's friend, just delivering lunch, which I can leave, right here, and go, immediately. It's fine, Lena said quickly, her cheeks burning. This is Dante. He was just leaving. Dante finished smoothly, his professional mask sliding back into place effortlessly. "It was good to see you again, Lena. Thank you for your help with the flowers." He nodded politely to Sophia. "Nice to meet you." He walked toward the door with controlled grace, but just before he left, he glanced back at Lena one last time. In that look, she saw everything he hadn't said. The warning, the regret, the undeniable pull between them that neither wanted, but both felt. Then he was gone, the bell chiming softly behind him. Sophia stood frozen for a full 3 seconds before exploding. "That's the guy. The injured stranger from 3 weeks ago. Lena. He looks like he walked out of a cologne commercial. The dangerous, expensive kind where they're on a yacht or in a mansion or something." Sophia. And the tension. "Oh my God, the tension. I felt like I needed to leave my own friend's flower shop because you two were basically having an entire conversation with your eyes. What is happening? Who is he? Why does he look like he could buy this entire block?" "It's complicated," Lena said weakly, picking up the card Dante had left and slipping it into her pocket. Complicated is his middle name. I guarantee it. Dante complicated gorgeous face. Sophia set down the Thai food and grabbed Lena's shoulders. "Okay, real talk. Is he dangerous? Like, should I be worried about you dangerous?" Lena thought about the warning, about the watchers she couldn't see, about the careful way Dante had told her to deny knowing him. Maybe. Yes, I don't know. That's not reassuring. I know. Lena sank onto the stool behind her counter. "But Sophia, when he looks at me, I feel like he sees me. Really sees me. Not just the florist who makes pretty arrangements, not just the quiet girl who lives alone and doesn't cause trouble. He sees something more. And what do you see when you look at him?" Lena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Dante's eyes, about the weariness and regret she'd glimpsed beneath his controlled exterior, about the way he'd touched her roses like they were precious and fragile. "I see someone who's lost. Someone who's made terrible choices and doesn't know how to find his way back. Someone who's given up on redemption, but desperately wants it anyway." Sophia sat down beside her, her usual energy subdued. "Lena, honey, you can't save everyone, especially not dangerous, mysterious men who show up bleeding at your back door. I'm not trying to save him. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can't stop thinking about him. Have you considered that might be exactly what he wants? Dangerous men are often very good at making you think about them. It's not like that, Lena protested, though she wasn't entirely sure. Was Dante manipulating her, using her kindness as a way into her life, or was the connection between them real, this sense that they'd both found something unexpected in each other? That night, alone in her apartment, Lena pulled out the card Dante had left. Just a phone number, stark black digits on white cardstock. A direct line to his world, to danger, to complications her simple life had never contained. She should throw it away, forget about him, return to her routine of flowers and coffee dates and quiet evenings reading on her couch. Instead, she placed it in her nightstand drawer, next to a pressed rose from her first day opening the shop. A reminder of beauty. And now, a reminder of something else. Something dangerous and impossible and utterly consuming. 3 days later, Lena was closing her shop at dusk when she noticed the black car again. This time it wasn't just parked across the street. It was moving slowly, keeping pace with her as she walked the 3 blocks to her apartment. Her heart began to race. She thought about the card in her purse, about Dante's warning. She reached for her phone just as the car stopped and the back door opened. But it wasn't Dante who stepped out. It was someone else. Someone whose smile was cold and whose eyes held no warmth whatsoever. Lena Kowalska, the man said, his voice smooth and threatening. We need to talk about your friend. The man who stepped out of the black car was shorter than Dante, but no less intimidating. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, his graying hair slicked back, his face lined with the kind of hardness that came from years of violence barely concealed beneath a veneer of sophistication. 2 other men emerged from the car behind him, larger, younger, clearly there for intimidation rather than conversation. Lena's hand tightened around her phone in her purse, her finger hovering over the speed dial she'd programmed for Dante's number 3 days ago. She'd told herself she'd never use it. Now she was grateful she'd saved it. I don't know what you're talking about, Lena said, proud that her voice came out steadier than she felt. The street was quiet, too quiet for 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. She noticed now that the usual flow of people seemed conspicuously absent, as if they'd been cleared away somehow. Don't insult my intelligence, the man said, taking a step closer. He smiled, but it was the smile of a predator. Dante Moretti hasn't been seen in your charming little neighborhood for years. Suddenly he's here multiple times in a month. He visits your shop. He lingers. Very unusual behavior for a man who's usually so disciplined. The way he said Dante's full name sent a chill down Lena's spine. Dante Moretti. She hadn't known his last name until now, but something about it rang familiar, like something she should recognize but couldn't quite place. I run a flower shop, Lena said carefully. Many people visit. I don't keep track of everyone who comes in. Oh, but Dante isn't everyone, is he? The man circled her slowly, like a shark. Dante Moretti is one of the most powerful men in New York. He controls territories from Brooklyn to Manhattan. He makes decisions that affect thousands of lives. And yet, he spends his valuable time visiting a small flower shop in Carroll Gardens. Why do you think that is? Lena's mind raced. She thought about Dante's warning. Deny everything, tell them nothing. But she also understood the dangerous game being played here. These men knew Dante had been to her shop. Lying completely would be pointless. She needed to minimize, deflect, make herself seem insignificant. He's my landlord, she said, which was true. He was checking on the building. We spoke briefly about the lease, that's all. That's all? The man stopped in front of her, his cold eyes boring into hers. My sources tell me he was here for over an hour on Tuesday. That's quite a long lease discussion. He was interested in the shop, in how business was going. Lena forced herself to meet his gaze without flinching. Is there a law against a landlord caring about his tenants? One of the larger men snorted, but the gray-haired man held up a hand, silencing him. You're braver than you look, Miss Kowalska, or more foolish. I haven't decided which. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, then held it up to show her a photograph. Lena's blood went cold. It was a picture of her shop, taken through the window. In it, she and Dante stood close together, his hand covering hers on his arm, their faces inches apart. The intimacy of the moment captured perfectly. Still just a lease discussion? The man asked softly. Lena's throat went dry. There was no explaining away that photograph, no minimizing what it showed. She'd been caught in an obvious lie, and these men knew it. What do you want? She asked, abandoning pretense. Smart girl. I want you to deliver a message to Dante. Tell him that Vincent Calabrese sends his regards. Tell him that his recent distractions have been noticed. And tell him that everyone he cares about, no matter how insignificant they might seem, is vulnerable. Vincent's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Can you remember all that? I'll remember, Lena said, anger beginning to cut through her fear. But I'm not insignificant, and I'm not a pawn in whatever game you're playing. Oh, but that's exactly what you are. Vincent leaned in close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, sharp and acrid. You're leverage. You're a weakness. And in our world, weaknesses get exploited. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Dante right now and tell him to meet you at your shop in 1 hour. Alone. And if I refuse? Then my associates will ensure you make the call anyway. And trust me, Miss Kowalska, you'd prefer to cooperate voluntarily. Lena's hand shook as she pulled out her phone. Every instinct screamed at her not to do this, not to lead Dante into a trap. But the two large men had moved closer, boxing her in, and she understood with crystal clarity that Vincent wasn't bluffing. She dialed Dante's number. It rang once before he answered. Lena. His voice was sharp with concern. Are you all right? Vincent held up a finger to his lips, a clear warning. Lena took a shaky breath. Dante, I need to see you. At the shop. In an hour. It's important. A pause. When Dante spoke again, his tone had changed. Harder. More controlled. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Vincent shook his head firmly. Lena swallowed. Please. I need you to come. Alone. Another pause, longer this time. Lena could practically hear Dante thinking, analyzing every word and inflection. I'll be there, he said finally. But Lena, if something's wrong... 1 hour, she interrupted, her voice breaking slightly. Please. She ended the call before he could say more. Vincent smiled approvingly and took the phone from her trembling hand. Excellent. Now, we're all going to take a little drive to your shop. You're going to open it up, turn on the lights, make everything look normal and inviting. And when Dante arrives, you're going to let him in. After that, you can leave. This is business between men. You're just the bait. The word hit Lena like a physical blow. Bait. She'd been reduced to bait, a lure to trap a dangerous man, and she'd just helped them do it. The drive back to her shop felt surreal. Vincent sat beside her in the back seat, casual and relaxed as if they were friends out for an evening ride. The two large men followed in a second car. As they pulled up to Bloom and Stems, Lena saw that the street was still eerily quiet, the neighboring businesses dark despite the early hour. You've cleared the block, she said dully. We're thorough, Vincent agreed. Now out you go. Remember, lights on, everything normal. Dante is a suspicious man. If anything seems off, he won't come in. And if he doesn't come in, we'll have to get creative about drawing him out. I'd hate for your lovely shop to become collateral damage. The threat was clear. Lena unlocked her shop with numb fingers, turned on the warm overhead lights, even lit the candles she usually saved for evening events. Her sanctuary, her safe space, had been turned into a trap. Vincent positioned himself in the back greenhouse, hidden from the front windows. The two large men waited in the storage room where Dante had once rested. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearly experienced in setting ambushes. Remember, Vincent called softly as Lena stood behind her counter, trying to look natural. When he arrives, you let him in. You exchange pleasantries. Then you excuse yourself. Say you need to get something from the back. Leave through the rear door. My men will make sure you're safely away before things get complicated. You're going to hurt him, Lena said, her voice hollow. We're going to have a conversation. What happens after that depends entirely on Dante's willingness to be reasonable. Vincent checked his watch. 20 minutes. I suggest you compose yourself. You look terrified, and that will make him suspicious. Lena tried to steady her breathing, tried to make her hands stop shaking. She arranged and rearranged roses on her work table, desperate for something to do with her trembling fingers. How had everything gone so wrong so quickly? 3 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been whether she'd ordered enough tulips for autumn arrangements. Now she was trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena watched the street through her window, dreading and desperately hoping for Dante's arrival in equal measure. Part of her wanted to warn him, to somehow signal the danger. But Vincent's cold eyes watched her from the greenhouse, and she knew any warning would be her last act. Then she saw him. Dante approached on foot, moving with that controlled grace she remembered. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, dressed down from his usual suits but no less imposing. As he got closer, Lena could see his face, alert, focused, his dark eyes scanning everything, missing nothing. He knew. Somehow he knew this was a trap, but he came anyway. The realization hit Lena with devastating force. Dante knew this was dangerous, knew he was walking into a setup, but he came because she'd asked him to, because he thought she needed him. He opened the door, the bell chiming cheerfully, such a normal sound in such an abnormal moment. His eyes found hers immediately and she saw the questions there, the concern, the readiness for violence. "Lena," he said carefully, stepping inside but not moving away from the door. "You said you needed to see me." She opened her mouth trying to form words that would warn him without being obvious. But before she could speak, Vincent emerged from the greenhouse, slow clapping echoing through the shop. "Bravo, Dante. I wondered if you'd actually be foolish enough to walk in here. Love does make fools of even the smartest men, doesn't it?" Dante's expression didn't change, but Lena saw his body tense, saw his weight shift subtly into a fighting stance. "Vincent, I should have known you'd involve an innocent woman in your petty power plays." "Petty?" Vincent laughed. "You've been distracted, Dante. Missing meetings, making uncharacteristic decisions. The families are concerned. They think you're going soft. And when a man in your position goes soft, it creates opportunities." The two large men emerged from the storage room, effectively blocking the back exit. Dante was surrounded and Lena stood frozen behind her counter, horrified at what she'd helped orchestrate. "Let her leave," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between us. She has nothing to do with our business." "Oh, but she has everything to do with it. She's the distraction, she's the weakness." Vincent pulled out a gun, sleek, black, terrifying in its casual appearance. He didn't point it at anyone, just held it loosely, a reminder of the power he wielded. "The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice for her?" "Don't," Lena said, finding her voice finally. "Dante, don't give him anything. I'm not worth—" "You are," Dante interrupted, his eyes never leaving Vincent. "You're worth more than any deal, any territory, any amount of power. So here's what's going to happen, Vincent. You're going to put down that weapon and walk away. You're going to forget about Lena, forget about this shop, forget about using innocent people as leverage. And in return, I won't destroy everything you've built over the past 20 years. Vincent's smile faltered slightly. "You're not in a position to make threats, aren't I?" Dante's voice was soft, dangerous. "You think I came here unprepared? You think I didn't know this was a setup the moment Lena called me?" Her voice was wrong. The words were wrong. Everything about that call screamed trap. He took a step forward, and despite being outnumbered and unarmed, Vincent's men shifted nervously. "I came anyway because I needed to see her, to make sure she was safe, but I didn't come alone." As if summoned by his words, the shop's lights suddenly cut out, plunging everything into darkness. Lena heard movement, shouts, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. She crouched behind her counter, her heart hammering, unable to see what was happening but hearing everything. The controlled violence, the brief struggle, Vincent's cursing, then the lights flickered back on. Dante stood in the center of her shop, breathing hard but apparently unharmed. Vincent's gun was on the floor, kicked far away. The two large men were being held by four others, clearly Dante's people, who'd somehow entered during the blackout. Vincent himself was on his knees, his earlier confidence completely gone. "You were saying something about power plays?" Dante said coldly. "Let me be absolutely clear, Vincent. You threatened someone under my protection. You used her to get to me. That kind of disrespect can't be tolerated. Not by the families, not by me, not by anyone." "Dante, please," Vincent started, but Dante cut him off with a sharp gesture. "You have 24 hours to leave New York. All your operations, all your assets, everything. You're out. If I see you or hear from you again, if you so much as think about Lena Kowalska or anyone else I care about, what happens next will make this look like mercy. Do you understand?" Vincent nodded frantically, his face pale. "I understand, I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Get him out of here," Dante said to his men, "and make sure the message gets to the other families. Anyone who thinks I've gone soft just learned otherwise." The shop emptied quickly. Vincent and his men hustled out into the night, Dante's people following to ensure compliance. Suddenly it was just Lena and Dante in the flower shop, surrounded by roses and the lingering scent of fear. Lena stood on shaking legs, her back pressed against the counter. "I'm so sorry. He forced me to call you. He said he'd hurt the shop. Hurt me if I didn't—" "I know." Dante crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands gentle as they cupped her face, tilting it up so he could examine her. Did he hurt you? Did any of them touch you? No, they threatened. They scared me. But they didn't hurt me. Tears were streaming down her face now, the fear and adrenaline finally breaking through. I led you into a trap. I brought you here knowing it was dangerous. You saved my life by making that call. His thumbs brushed away her tears with surprising tenderness. The way you said my name, the specific words you used, you were trying to warn me. And you did. That gave me time to prepare, to position my people. If you'd tried to be clever, tried to hide what was happening, I might have walked in blind, but you trusted me to understand. And I did. I put you in danger. No, I put you in danger by involving you in my world at all. This is my fault, Lena. All of it. From the moment I came to your shop 3 weeks ago, I've been putting you at risk. Vincent was right about one thing. You're my weakness. And in my world, weaknesses get exploited. He started to pull away, but Lena grabbed his jacket, holding him close. Don't you dare walk away right now. Don't you dare use this as an excuse to disappear for my protection or my own good. I'm not a child, Dante. I make my own choices, and I choose. The front window exploded. Lena didn't have time to scream, didn't have time to process what was happening. One moment she was holding Dante's jacket, the next she was on the floor with his body covering hers, protecting her from the shower of glass raining down around them. She heard the sound a split second later. A gunshot, then another. Someone was shooting at them from the street. Stay down, Dante ordered, his body a shield over hers. He had a gun now. Where had he gotten a gun? And was returning fire through the broken window. This wasn't supposed to happen. Vincent was gone. The danger was over. But clearly someone else had decided to take their shot while Dante was distracted. More gunfire. Lena pressed her face against the cool floor of her shop, Dante's weight solid and protective above her. She could smell gunpowder and blood and the sweet scent of crushed flowers. Her beautiful roses trampled in the violence. Her sanctuary destroyed. Then, in the brief pause between shots, Lena heard Dante grunt in pain. No, she whispered, twisting under him to see his face. Blood was seeping through his jacket, spreading across his shoulder. No, Dante, you're hit. It's fine. Stay down. His voice was strained but controlled. He fired 3 more shots, and the shooting from the street stopped. Silence fell, thick and terrible. Lena's hands were shaking as she pressed against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. You're not fine. You need a hospital. What I need is for you to be safe. He managed to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his injury. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. My people will be here in minutes. They'll clean this up. They'll make sure you're protected. But Lena, you need to understand what this means. Tonight was a message. Vincent might have been the messenger, but there are others who see you as my weakness now. Others who'll try to use you against me. So what are you saying? That I should pretend I don't know you? That I should go back to my simple life and forget any of this happened? Lena's voice rose, anger cutting through her fear. It's too late for that, Dante. They already know about me. The damage is already done. Running away now won't make me safer, it'll just make me alone and vulnerable. He stared at her, and in his dark eyes, she saw the war he was fighting with himself. The desire to protect her battling against the knowledge that she was right, that abandoning her now would leave her exposed. You should hate me, he said roughly. After tonight, after everything I've brought into your life, you should hate me. I should, Lena agreed. But I don't. And that's my choice to make, not yours. Outside she heard cars screeching to a stop, doors slamming, voices shouting. Dante's people had arrived, just as he'd said they would. But in the moment before they burst through the door, before the chaos of cleanup and questions and consequences descended, Lena and Dante looked at each other in the ruins of her flower shop, surrounded by broken glass and crushed petals, and the undeniable truth neither could ignore anymore. They were bound together now, by danger, by choice, by something neither of them fully understood, but both felt with devastating intensity. Whatever came next, there was no going back to the way things were. The innocent florist and the dangerous Mafia boss had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And in Dante's eyes, for the first time, Lena saw not just darkness and regret, but something else. Hope. Fragile and impossible and terrifying, but hope nonetheless. The safe house was nothing like Lena expected. She'd imagined something dark and fortress-like, all concrete walls and barred windows. Instead, it was a beautifully restored farmhouse in upstate New York, surrounded by acres of quiet woods painted in autumn colors. The October sun filtered through tall windows, casting warm light across hardwood floors and comfortable furniture that looked lived in rather than staged. "It belonged to my grandmother," Dante said quietly as one of his men, a surprisingly gentle giant named Marco, helped him inside. His shoulder was bandaged now, the bullet removed by a private doctor who'd arrived at Lena's shop within 20 minutes of the shooting. "She left it to me when she died. It's one of the few places connected to my name that's actually peaceful." Lena followed them in, still in shock from the night's events. Her shop was closed indefinitely, the front window boarded up, police tape across the door. Dante's people had handled everything with efficient precision. Statements given, stories coordinated, evidence cleaned. To the outside world, it looked like a random act of violence, a stray bullet from a street altercation. No mention of mafia bosses or power struggles or innocent florists caught in the crossfire. Sophia had called 17 times. Lena had finally answered, keeping her voice steady as she explained she was taking a few days away after the random shooting had rattled her. Sophia had wanted to come immediately, but Lena had talked her down, promising she was safe, that she just needed time to process. The lies tasted bitter on her tongue. "The bedroom upstairs is yours," Dante said, wincing as Marco helped him onto the living room couch. "You'll be safe here. I have people positioned around the perimeter. Nobody gets within a mile without us knowing." "What about you?" Lena asked, nodding at his injured shoulder. "Where will you sleep?" "Here is fine. I've slept in worse places." "You're injured. You need a proper bed." She crossed her arms, summoning strength she didn't know she had left. "I'll take the couch. You take the bedroom." Marco, who'd been preparing to leave, paused at the door with a barely suppressed smile. Dante noticed and shot him a warning look. "I'll be outside if you need anything, boss." "Miss Kowalska." Marco nodded respectfully and disappeared. Alone now, Lena and Dante faced each other across the cozy living room. The domesticity of the moment felt surreal after the violence of hours before. Dante sitting on a couch that had probably hosted countless family gatherings. Lena standing in a farmhouse kitchen that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood. Two people from impossible worlds, thrown together by circumstances neither could control. "You should rest," Dante said finally. "It's been a traumatic night. So should you. But neither of us will we?" Lena moved to the kitchen, finding it surprisingly well stocked. "When was the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." "Then I'm making food. Don't argue." She opened cabinets, finding pasta, canned tomatoes, herbs. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of cooking. Something normal, something grounding. "My grandmother taught me how to make pasta sauce from scratch. She said food was love made visible. That feeding someone was the most basic form of caring." She felt rather than saw Dante watching her as she worked. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with unspoken words, with questions neither knew how to ask. "Why did you jump in front of me?" Dante asked suddenly. "When that gun fired, you threw yourself between me and the bullet. Why?" Lena's hands stilled over the pot. That moment was burned into her memory. The glint of metal in the streetlight, the instinctive surge of terror, her body moving before her mind could process what she was doing. She'd thrown herself at Dante, pushing him aside, feeling the bullet's wind as it passed where his head had been milliseconds before. "I don't know," she said honestly. I couldn't let you die. The thought of it, of you being gone, it was unbearable. So I moved. You could have been killed. So could you." She turned to face him, wooden spoon still in hand. "And for some reason that mattered more to me than my own safety. Don't ask me to explain it logically, Dante. I can't. All I know is that in that moment, your life felt more important than mine." His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, held something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Raw, honest vulnerability. "No one's ever done that for me before," he said quietly. "Put themselves in danger for my sake. People fear me, respect me, obey me, but protect me, risk themselves for me. That doesn't happen in my world. Maybe your world is smaller than you think." Lena turned back to the stove, stirring the sauce. "Maybe you've surrounded yourself with people who see your power instead of your humanity. But I see you, Dante. Not the mafia boss. Not the dangerous man everyone fears. I see the person underneath all that. The one who looks at flowers like they're miracles. The one who came back to my shop even though he knew it was dangerous. The one who's been carrying so much weight for so long that he's forgotten what it feels like to be cared for, simply for being himself." The silence stretched longer this time. When Lena finally plated the pasta and brought it to the coffee table, sitting beside Dante on the couch, she saw that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't deserve you," he said, his voice rough. "Probably not," Lena agreed, handing him a fork. "But that's not really the point, is it? Deserve doesn't factor into how we feel. It just is." They ate in silence, and Lena watched Dante's face gradually soften as the food and warmth worked their simple magic. Here in his grandmother's house, away from the violence and power struggles, he looked different. Younger somehow. Less burdened. "Tell me about her," Lena said. "Your grandmother." Dante was quiet for a long moment, but then he began to speak. "She was the only person in my family who tried to keep me out of this life. My father was already deep in it. My uncles, my cousins. But Nonna Rosa, she wanted something different for me. She used to bring me here every summer, away from the city, away from the business. We'd work in her garden, cook together, sit on the porch at night and count stars." His voice grew softer, distant with memory. "She told me once that everyone has two paths in front of them. The path that's easy, that follows what everyone expects, and the path that's hard, that requires courage to walk alone. She begged me to choose the hard path, to break the cycle. But you didn't." "No. When I was 17, my father was killed, shot in the street like an animal, and I was so angry, so consumed with rage and grief, that I threw myself into the family business. I became everything Nonna Rosa feared I would become. She died 5 years later. I think of a broken heart, watching me destroy the person she'd tried so hard to save." He set down his fork, his food only half eaten. "She left me this house in her will, along with a letter that said she still believed in me, that it was never too late to choose the harder path. Do you still have the letter?" Dante nodded, standing slowly and moving to a bookshelf in the corner. He pulled down a worn wooden box and extracted a yellowed envelope, handling it with reverence. He didn't open it, just held it, his thumb tracing the faded ink of his name on the front. "I read it sometimes, when the weight of everything gets too heavy, when I forget why I'm doing any of this." He looked at Lena, and in his eyes she saw the war he'd been fighting with himself for years. She wrote that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing differently in every moment moving forward. That even if I'd made terrible choices, I could still make better ones. That I could still become the man she believed I could be. Lena stood and crossed to him, taking the letter gently from his hands and setting it aside. Then she took his face in her hands, making him look at her. She was right. "It's not too late, Dante. It's never too late. You don't understand what I've done, the decisions I've made, the people I've—" He stopped, unable to finish. "You're right. I don't understand. But I understand this. Whatever you've done, whoever you've been, that's not who you have to be tomorrow, or the next day, or the next." She let her hands drop but held his gaze. "I see the man you could be, the one who's still in there, buried under years of violence and survival and doing what you thought you had to do. That man is worth saving, Dante, and he's worth fighting for." "Why?" The word was barely a whisper. "Why would you fight for me?" Lena opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Because the truth was complicated and simple at the same time. Because despite everything, the danger, the violence, the impossible gulf between their worlds, she'd fallen for him, for the broken, searching man beneath the armor, for the vulnerability he showed only to her, for the way he looked at her roses like they were sacred, for the hope she saw flickering in his eyes even as he tried to extinguish it. "Because everyone deserves someone who sees them," she said finally, "really sees them. And I see you, Dante Moretti. I see who you are and who you could be, and I choose to believe in the second one." He pulled her against him then, carefully because of his injured shoulder, but firmly enough that she could feel his heart racing against hers. They stood like that in his grandmother's living room, surrounded by memories of a woman who'd believed in second chances, and Lena felt something shift between them, something deeper than attraction, more profound than circumstance. This was choice. Conscious, deliberate choice. Over the next 3 days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Dante's shoulder healed slowly. The bandages changed daily by Marco, who arrived each morning with supplies and updates from the city. The news wasn't good. Vincent had left town as ordered, but his departure had created a power vacuum. Other families were positioning themselves, testing boundaries, looking for weaknesses. "They're using my absence to make moves," Dante explained one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Every day I'm here, away from the city, they gain ground. So go back," Lena said, though the words hurt to say. Do what you need to do. And leave you here alone? Not a chance. His hand found hers on the porch railing, his fingers intertwining with hers. I have people handling things. It's fine. But Lena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when Marco delivered particularly troubling news. This peaceful interlude couldn't last forever. Eventually Dante would have to return to his world, to his responsibilities, to the violence and power that defined his existence. The question was, where did that leave her? On the fourth night, unable to sleep, Lena found Dante in the kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at an open laptop. The blue screen light made his face look haggard, older. You should be resting, she said softly. So should you. He closed the laptop, rubbing his eyes. Can't sleep? Too much thinking. She sat across from him at the kitchen table. Dante, we need to talk about what happens next. I know. He leaned back in his chair, looking at her with those dark, tired eyes. I've been trying to figure it out. How to keep you safe while still living the life I've built. And I can't see a way forward that doesn't end with you getting hurt. So what are you saying, that this, us, is impossible? I'm saying that loving you is the most selfish thing I've ever done. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Because I know what my world does to people. I've seen it destroy families, corrupt good people, turn beauty into ash. And you're so good, Lena. So pure and kind and full of light. Bringing you into my darkness feels like a crime worse than anything I've ever committed. Stop deciding what's best for me, Lena said, her voice firm. I'm not a child or a flower that needs protecting from the elements. I'm a grown woman capable of making my own choices. And I choose you, Dante. I choose this, whatever this is, whatever it becomes. The danger, the complications, all of it. I choose you, even if it means giving up your simple life, your shop, your friends, your safety. My shop was already taken from me the moment Vincent walked into my life. My safety was compromised the second you stumbled through my back door. And my friends? She thought of Sophia, of the lies she'd had to tell. I'll find a way to maintain those relationships without putting them in danger. But I won't give up on you. On us. Not without fighting for it first. Dante stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His silhouette was dark against the night sky, shoulders tense with the weight of decisions he was trying to make. There might be a way, he said slowly. It's risky. It would mean giving up everything I've built. Walking away from the families, from the territories, from all of it. People have tried to leave before. Most end up dead. But some manage to negotiate their way out. Provide enough value, enough insurance that the families decide it's more profitable to let them go than to eliminate them. Lena's heart began to race. You'd do that? Leave everything? For you? Yes. He turned to face her, and in his expression she saw determination mixed with terror. I've spent 15 years building power in a world I never truly wanted to be part of. Nonna Rosa tried to show me another path, but I was too angry, too hurt to see it. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can still choose the harder path she talked about. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair so their eyes were level. But I need you to understand what you're signing up for. If I do this, if I try to leave, there will be consequences. Negotiations that could turn violent. People who see betrayal where I see freedom. It could take months, maybe years. And through all of it, you'd be a target. A way to control me, to hurt me, to force me back in line. I understand. Do you? Really? His hands gripped hers almost desperately. Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. We'd have to leave New York. Start over somewhere new. New names, new lives, constantly looking over our shoulders. Your flower shop, your apartment, your entire life in Brooklyn, gone. Can you live with that? Lena thought about Bloom and Stems, about the life she'd so carefully built. The early morning light through her windows, the scent of roses, the satisfaction of creating beauty for others. It had been everything she'd wanted, but that was before Dante, before she'd discovered that there was something more powerful than safety, more compelling than routine, before she'd felt truly seen by another person, truly connected, truly alive. I can live with that, she said. But can you? Can you really walk away from everything you've known? The power, the respect, the control? Dante smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Not the cold smiles of a man in control, but the warm smile of someone who'd finally found something worth more than power. I never wanted those things, he admitted. I wanted security. I wanted respect. I wanted to never feel as helpless as I did the night my father died. But power doesn't bring security, Lena. It brings paranoia. It brings isolation. It brings nights like the one when you threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for me. His voice cracked slightly. That moment, watching you risk everything for me, I realized something. Real security isn't about controlling others. It's about trusting someone enough to be vulnerable with them. And real power isn't dominating people. It's having the courage to choose love over fear. Tears streamed down Lena's face now and she didn't bother wiping them away. So what do? I make the calls. I set up meetings with the right people. I offer them what they want. Assurances that I won't interfere with their operations. Information about competitors, financial incentives. Whatever it takes to buy our freedom. He stood, pulling her up with him. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong, if the negotiations fail and things turn violent, you run. You take the new identity my people will create for you and you disappear. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You just run and build a new life somewhere safe. Promise me. Dante. Promise me, Lena. I can face anything. Imprisonment, violence, even death, as long as I know you're safe. But I can't do this if I'm worried about you sacrificing yourself for me again. Promise. Lena wanted to refuse. Wanted to insist that they'd face everything together. But she saw the desperate sincerity in his eyes and understood that he needed this promise the way a drowning man needs air. I promise, she whispered. He kissed her then, soft and tender, and full of all the emotion they'd both been holding back. In that kiss was hope and fear and determination and love. Complicated, impossible, but undeniably real love. When they finally pulled apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. My grandmother would have liked you. She would have said you were exactly the kind of person worth becoming better for. I would have liked her too, Lena said. Anyone who believed in second chances as much as she did must have been extraordinary. She was. Dante stepped back, his expression hardening with resolve. I'll start making calls tomorrow. Marco can set up meetings. It'll probably take a few weeks to arrange everything properly. Until then, we stay here, hidden, safe. Just the two of us in Nonna Rosa's house, planning a future that shouldn't be possible but maybe, just maybe, is. That night, they slept in separate rooms as they had every night since arriving at the safe house. But something fundamental had changed. They'd made their choice. Dante would try to leave his violent world behind. Lena would walk away from the simple life she'd built. Together they'd forge something new, something that blended his hard-won wisdom with her gentle strength, his determination with her hope. It was terrifying and impossible and fraught with danger. But watching the sunrise the next morning from the porch, Dante's hand warm in hers, Lena felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. Not the absence of danger, not the security of routine, but the deep, profound peace that came from choosing love even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when it required everything you had. Dante began making his calls that afternoon, speaking in low voices with people whose names Lena didn't know. She heard fragments, negotiations, territories, assurances, deals, the language of a world she was still learning to understand. But she also heard something else in Dante's voice, something that hadn't been there before. Freedom. The freedom that came from finally choosing differently. From walking the harder path his grandmother had always believed he could walk. From blooming in the ashes of who he'd been, and becoming who he was meant to be. The meeting was set for a cold November evening in a warehouse on the edge of Manhattan. Neutral territory, witnessed by representatives from 3 families. Dante had spent weeks preparing, gathering leverage, making promises, offering assurances. Everything hinged on this single conversation. Lena waited at the safe house, pacing the living room floor as Marco stood guard by the door. Dante had left at sunset, his expression calm but his eyes betraying the tension he felt. He'd kissed her goodbye like it might be the last time, holding her close and whispering, "Remember your promise." She'd nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Now, 3 hours later, her phone finally rang. "It's done." Dante's voice came through, rough with exhaustion and something else. Relief. They agreed. "I'm out." Lena's knees buckled and she sank onto the couch. "Really? Just like that?" "Not just like that. It cost me everything I had. Properties, investments, connections. I gave them enough information and assets to make letting me go more valuable than killing me. But yes, I'm free. We're free. When will you be back? 2 hours. Pack light. We leave tonight. The next months blurred together in a sequence of motels, temporary apartments, and careful movements. Dante's people provided them with new identities. Lena became Elena Morrison. Dante became Daniel Morris. Simple names for a simple life. They finally settled in a small coastal town in Oregon, about as far from New York as they could get while staying in the country. The town was quiet, unassuming, the kind of place where people minded their own business, and newcomers were welcomed with cautious friendliness. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Morrison's Blooms, catching dust motes in its golden light. Lena, Elena now, though she was still getting used to it, stood behind the counter of her new shop, smaller than Bloom and Stems, but no less loved. The scent of fresh roses filled the air, mixed with the salt breeze from the ocean 2 blocks away. The bell above the door chimed, and Dante walked in carrying 2 coffee cups and a bag from the bakery down the street. He wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, his hair slightly longer than it had been in New York, his face more relaxed than she'd ever seen it. "Mrs. Patterson called," he said, setting down the coffee. "Wants a bouquet for her granddaughter's birthday. I told her we'd have it ready by noon." Lena smiled at the coincidence of the name, though this Mrs. Patterson was different, a retired teacher who'd welcomed them warmly when they'd opened the shop 2 months ago. "Yellow roses and white lilies?" She said, "Surprise her. Apparently she trusts our judgment now." Dante moved behind the counter, standing close enough that their shoulders touched. "Never thought I'd be taking flower orders, but I'm getting good at it." He was. In the months since leaving New York, Dante had transformed. The hard edges had softened. The constant vigilance had eased into simple awareness. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, slept through the night without nightmares. Working with flowers, creating beauty instead of managing violence, had begun healing something broken inside him. They still looked over their shoulders sometimes, still stayed alert for threats that might never come. The families had honored their agreement, but trust was earned slowly in their former world. For now, though, they were safe, free, building something real together. "I'll start on the arrangement," Lena said, gathering yellow roses from the cooler. "Can you help Mrs. Chen when she comes in for her tulips? The one who always tries to set me up with her granddaughter?" Dante grinned. "Despite the wedding ring I pointedly wear." Lena glanced at the simple gold band on her left hand, matching the one Dante wore. They'd married quietly a month ago, just the 2 of them and a justice of the peace, but it had meant everything. A promise, a commitment, a choice to build this new life together. "Tell her your wife is the jealous type," Lena suggested playfully. "My wife is perfect," Dante corrected, leaning down to kiss her softly. "And I remind Mrs. Chen of that every single time." The day passed in gentle rhythm. Customers came and went, arrangements were created, coffee was consumed. Dante proved surprisingly good with elderly customers, his natural authority translating into a reassuring presence that put people at ease. Lena watched him help a widower choose flowers for his wife's grave, his voice gentle and patient, and felt her heart swell with love. This was what redemption looked like. Not dramatic, not flashy, just quiet, consistent choices to be better, to do better, to create rather than destroy. As they closed the shop that evening, Dante pulled her close, both of them standing among the remaining flowers, roses and lilies, chrysanthemums and tulips, all the beauty they'd cultivated together. "Do you miss it?" he asked quietly. "Your old life, Brooklyn, your friends." Lena had stayed in touch with Sophia through carefully anonymous messages, enough to let her friend know she was safe and happy without revealing where. It hurt, maintaining that distance, but it was necessary. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I miss Sophia. I miss certain customers. I miss the familiarity of it all." She turned in his arms to face him. "But I don't regret this. Any of it. Do you?" "Never." He touched the scar on her shoulder where she'd been grazed by flying glass that terrible night. "You jumped in front of death for me. You chose me when you should have run. You believed I could be better when I'd stopped believing it myself. How could I regret anything that brought us here?" Through the shop window they could see the street darkening, shops closing, the small town settling into evening quiet. It was ordinary, simple, safe. Everything Lena had wanted in her old life, but richer now, deeper, because it had been chosen rather than defaulted to, because she shared it with someone who understood the cost of this peace. "Your grandmother would be proud," Lena said softly. I hope so. Dante's voice was thick with emotion. I finally chose the harder path. It took me 20 years and meeting you to find the courage, but I chose it. And Lena, he cupped her face gently. I'd choose it again. Every single time. You're worth every sacrifice, every risk, every moment of fear. You're worth everything. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky, surrounded by flowers and the life they'd built from ashes. Outside, the world continued, dangerous and complicated and full of uncertainty. But here in their small shop in a quiet town, they'd found something rare, not perfection, not safety from all harm, but something more precious. The freedom to grow, to bloom, to become who they were meant to be. Together, a florist who'd seen darkness and chose light anyway. A man who'd lived in shadows and finally stepped into the sun. Two unlikely souls who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and refused to let go. The scars remained, on Lena's shoulder, on Dante's arm, in memories they'd carry forever. But scars were proof of survival, proof that they'd faced the worst and chosen to keep living anyway, chosen to keep loving anyway. As they locked up the shop and walked home through the quiet streets hand in hand, Lena thought about that first morning when Dante had crashed into her greenhouse, wounded and desperate. She'd made a choice that day, to help instead of fear, to see humanity instead of danger. That choice had changed everything, had cost her the life she'd known, had given her a life she'd never imagined. And looking at Dante beside her, seeing the peace in his expression, the hope in his eyes, the gentle way he held her hand like she was something precious, Lena knew she'd make that same choice again. Love was always a risk, always a leap into the unknown. But some risks were worth taking. Some leaps led to solid ground, where flowers could grow, where darkness could transform into light, where two broken people could become whole. Together, Morrison's blooms had expanded, a greenhouse in back now, where Lena grew specialty orchids. Dante had taken classes in horticulture, his natural intelligence finding new outlet in understanding soil composition and growing cycles. They employed 2 part-time workers and had become fixtures in the community. Some nights Dante still woke from nightmares about his old life. Some days, Lena still felt the ghost of fear from that terrible evening. But those moments grew rarer as time passed, replaced by ordinary joys. Morning coffee, shared laughter, the satisfaction of a perfectly arranged bouquet. They'd learned that redemption wasn't a destination but a journey, that becoming better was a daily choice made in small moments and quiet decisions. That love wasn't about perfection, but about choosing each other again and again through every difficulty. And in their small shop by the ocean, surrounded by blooming flowers and the life they'd fought so hard to build, they chose each other still, every single day.